Thank you. We're just going to go to housekeeping arrangements. Rachel, please.
Welcome everyone to this meeting of Our Council Transitional Committee, which is being held in the Council Chamber at the Town Hall. Please note that social distancing restrictions and other public health safety measures still apply. So please keep your distance from others. Please remain seated as much as possible during the meeting, and if you need to leave your seat, please ensure you wear a mask. Hand sanitizer is also available for you to use. This meeting is a public meeting and is being live streamed for the public to view. Can I ask that when you wish to speak, you raise your hand and the chair will indicate when you can speak. Please ensure that your microphone is switched on. When you have finished speaking, please switch your microphone off. The toilets are outside on the corridor, ladies are to the left and men's to the right. We are not aware of any planned fire alarms, so if the fire alarm does sound, please leave the chamber and make your way back out of the building towards the nearest fire exit, which can be found on the stairwell to the right of the chamber. We will now move to quick introductions. Chair?
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Councillor Zahira Naz and I'm a councillor for the Darnall ward. I'm also a co-chair of this committee.
Hello, my name is Councillor Colton Rivers of Broomhill and Sharon Vale. Good morning, I'm Councillor Kate MacDonald. I'm also the Executive Member for Finance and Resources.
Good morning, my name is Barbara Masters, Councillor for Ecclesall. I'm substituting for Councillor Simon Clement-Jones.
Hello, I'm Councillor Dawn Dale, Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside and co-chair to this committee.
Councillor Colin Ross, member of the committee and councillor for Dore and Totley ward.
I'm Christine Gilligan and I'm councillor for Hillsborough.
Thank you very much. Is there any apologies for absence?
There is, Chair, and that's an apology from, from Councillor Brian Lodge.
Thank you. Exclusions of public and press. No, there's no item.
Excuse me, I think we need to record an apology for Councillor Penny Baker as well. Thank you.
Thank you, that's fine. Any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of previous meeting. Also, have everybody got a hard copy? There is some hard copies available on the desk in the front here. Can we agree the minutes from the previous meeting? Yep. Thank you. Public questions and petitions. I'm not aware of any questions or petitions. Rachel, no. Alice? No. Come in, Kate.
Sorry, Chair, I had a matter arising from the minutes.
That's fine.
Under item 7, I'd just like to thank the committee for the previous discussion around customer services and experience, and just to let you know that we've currently engaged with the Local Government Association to have a peer review of customer services, because, you know, we feel that we really want to support the service in improving as quickly as possible. I thought they could, given the interest in it from this committee, I thought you would like to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I'm going to pass over to James Henderson now and Nicola for their presentation on the new corporate performance framework. I will allow questions after the presentation, so if you do have questions, just wait for the presentation to finish and then I'll bring you in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is James Henderson. I'm Director of Policy, Performance and Communications for the City Council. Can I introduce my colleague, Nicola McHugh, who is the Business Intelligence and Performance Manager, who's going to assist with this item as well. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation to the committee this morning. The item that we've got is looking at the new corporate performance framework, and what we're doing this morning is presenting an early draft of that framework to the committee for your comments and views, and I'll come back to that at the end. As the committee may be aware, there is a commitment within the one-year plan to become a more performance-focused organisation as a council, and this framework that we're presenting this morning is one of the ways in which we are beginning to do that. So before I get into the framework itself, I thought it might just be helpful to set out for the committee our understanding of performance management, and I appreciate that this will be something that many of you will have experience of anyway. So apologies if I'm going over things that you're already aware of. But by performance management, we're really talking about a process or a tool that helps us to understand, as an organisation, how we're doing against the commitments and ambitions that we have set for ourselves, to understand how the organisation is improving or not over time and in comparison to others, and to help the organisation to identify the actions and changes that it needs to make to improve areas of underperformance. And in that sense, performance management can be thought of as a cycle from an understanding of current performance, an analysis of that performance, to taking action to improve that, and then determining and identifying how that action is leading to improvements in performance. So it's perhaps helpful to think of it in that way. And that final step of moving from an analysis and understanding of performance into action is the critical one as far as I'm concerned. And there should be a thread as well from the overall priorities of the organisation to the performance of the organisation overall, its portfolios, the services, teams and individuals. So it should go right the way through the organisation in that sense. So we think about performance through a number of different lenses. So there is a lens of service performance. So how is the service doing overall against the processes, activities, outputs and outcomes that it has set for itself. Customer performance, and I know that the committee had a conversation last time about customer experience, so understanding how satisfied the people that we are delivering for are with the quality of the services that we are providing. Financial performance is a really important part of the overall understanding of how we're doing as an organisation. And then the performance from a workforce perspective as well. So looking at those things in totality gives us a picture overall of performance. And what I also wanted just to mention briefly was what we're trying to do within the new performance framework to ensure that we have what might be called a good set of measures. And what do I mean by good? So that's partly about having sufficient confidence in the data that it's timely, so that we're getting it at a point where we can actually take some action, that we're not looking at something that's 12 months out of date, that it's accurate, and that it's complete, that it gives us that overall picture of performance. Also that we've got some way of understanding what our baseline level is, what targets that we're setting for the performance, how we're performing over time, and that we've got some comparative information to allow us to understand what our performance is like compared to other similar organisations. So that might be other local authorities, particularly core cities or other metropolitan authorities, but it might be other organisations for some aspects as well. So we also need to make sure, and I think this is going to be increasingly important, that we can both assess our progress at a citywide level, but also by individual local area committee as well. And there will need to be that two-way consideration of performance in relation to local area committees, so understanding how we're doing in the set of measures that we've identified for the organisation overall at a local level, and incorporating that information into the data that's provided to local area committees, but also building up, so ensuring that the local area committee priorities are fed into some of the things that we're looking at organisation-wide across the council. So that's just a little bit of background. In terms of the performance management framework that we've got in front of us today, we were in the process of developing a new performance management framework just as the pandemic struck, and understandably I hope our focus switched at that point to doing a lot of work to understand the COVID-19 virus and our organisational performance in terms of how we were responding to the issues of the pandemic and recovering from it as a city. Now with the one-year plan in place, we've revisited the work that we did pre-pandemic, and we have developed a new framework that responds to the priorities and commitments in the one-year plan, that makes sure that we can track through how we're performing against those commitments, and also that we have an understanding of how we are meeting the different actions and sort of, I suppose, specific commitments to develop, for example, a new strategy or a new piece of work, and making sure that we're tracking those as well as some of the performance issues that are flagged in the one-year plan. So alongside the development of that framework, we are also looking to emphasise flexibility within that as we move to our longer term corporate plan and city strategy over the next period, and also that we've got sufficient flexibility within the framework as we move into the committee system from May, and as I've said, that are able to respond to the priorities of the local area committees as well. One of the other things that we are doing sort of behind the scenes a little bit is improving the underlying technology infrastructure that we use for performance management within the organisation, allowing more timely reporting and more automation, which means that we should have that we should be able to report on performance more quickly, and that will enable us to have a more timely response and be able to put actions in place perhaps a bit better than we're able to at the moment. So in terms of today's conversation, what you've got in front of you is the set of overall measures that we've developed. Those are split out by the themes in the one-year plan. I would say that they are still draft, and we are really interested in hearing the committee's feedback on that framework as to whether that works, whether there are any particular gaps that you've identified within it, and to invite your general comments and feedback on it. We'd also be interested in the committee's views about whether this would be useful for the new committees when they come into being in May, recognising that they will have decision-making responsibilities and will want to be able to understand the performance of the services that that those new committees are responsible for. So in the sort of transitional committee, testing things out, pilot mode ahead of the introduction of the full committee system in May. It would be useful to get your views on that. We'd also be interested in your specific views on the measures in the Our Council section, given the focus of this committee. And finally, to identify any areas in addition to those that are set out in the paper where a deeper dive, either by this committee or one of the other committees, would be helpful. I am, though, on that last point, really conscious that what we're presenting today is in some senses a bit of an abstract framework, because we're not yet at the stage of being able to report to the committee the actual performance information and performance trends that we have. So I am conscious of that. However, we should have a version of the performance framework at an early point in the new year that will have data in it, that will have targets and trends. And of course, we'd be happy to update the committee on that as that becomes available in the early part of the new year. I'll stop there. Nicola, is there anything that you want to add that I haven't covered?
Not at this stage. I think we'll just take comments and questions, if that's okay. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, James. I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. There's some questions and some comments. Actually, I mean, data collection has to be for a purpose, and there's no point just collecting data and not to do with it. And I think one of the tricks of going into the new committee system is how the committees, being balanced, can actually operate a scrutiny function as well. So where the data is showing underperformance or excellence in performance that can be replicated in other areas, we need a mechanism of being able to report that to the relevant committee. And I think before May, we need to have identified which streams of data in the performance management are going to be reported to which committee, so there's clear lines of responsibility for who is monitoring which performance, so underperformance in whatever area doesn't get lost. So that's my first point. More specifically, a general point really, but it's an issue that I suppose I raised with the leader and senior executive directors on the walk about it, my own particular ward, but that I realise this can be replicated in any ward. That Dawn and Totley ward, let's face it, overall comes out very well in indices of social deprivation. However, that masks pockets of real social deprivation that are in there, and I'm sure that can be replicated in other wards as well. So what I would like to see is some mechanism that we don't just use blanket indices of social deprivation for the whole ward. It can go down to neighbourhood level, so areas of deprivation, and there's a couple of instances where it's referred to, you know, like detached youth workers and various things, and ASBs can be identified rather than being masked out by the average. So that's my second point. Third point, more specifically, is on page 20. Oh, thank you very much for the A3. Working on the A2 versions of the data was quite tricky, actually. But I've noted on page 20. I'll just see if I can find it so I can read it a bit more easily on the enlarged version, which is the really support for business and planning. Looking at the line there, I wonder whether in planning applications and business support there needs to be a measure for how quickly and how responsive the planning department are to requests for help and development, because we do hear tales of developers finding I'm trying to be diplomatic in words, Sheffield Planning Department less responsive and less helpful than other departments. That's not to say I'm wanting an open door for wholesale development, but I think, you know, encouraging development to support businesses and establishment of factories or whatever, and identifying of suitable sites could well help the economic regeneration, and I think that needs to be highlighted somewhere in there. And my final point is that there is reference to the at the bottom of page 19, publication of a local draft plan, which has been delayed and delayed and delayed. I highlight that slightly mischievously to hopefully that the date of, I think it says 2022, will actually be held to this time rather than slipping yet again. So some general points and a couple of specific ones there.
James?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Ross. Just taking those points, and I'll probably bring Nicola in on some of these as well. So the point that you made at the beginning about a mechanism to report the performance framework to the new committees and ensuring that underperformance isn't lost. Yes, I think that's a really important facet of what we are trying to do through this work. Obviously, that will depend on gaining the understanding of the remits of the new committees, but what we want to do through this is to have a framework that we can quite quickly and easily split out between the committees, so that there is that line of sight between the committee responsibility and the performance measures that they will need to have accountability for and will want to scrutinise. So yes, we're very much working on that at the moment, but obviously there are some bits of the jigsaw that need to be in place before we're able to do that. The point that you made about identifying small area geographies and looking at performance at those levels rather than averaging out over the city or over a ward, we already have some information that's available at neighbourhood or lower super output area level. Nicola, do you want to say anything on that point specifically?
Thanks, James. Yeah, the indices of deprivation that you referenced, Councillor Ross, would be available at that lower sort of geographical area, and I think what we would do is to see what was the most appropriate level for both the corporate performance framework and then the linked performance information that's available at LACS, and identify which reporting level would be most appropriate at which scale to give the level of detail that you were talking about there. In terms of the knowing in more smaller detail about, for example, ASB and youth services, those are two areas that we're working closely with the service at the moment to try and understand what would be the best measures to be able to give us that level of clarity, both about the specifics of the topic, but also kind of the geographical incidents and things like that. So that working with the service and with South Yorkshire Police to identify what's available and make sure that we're bringing that in, recognising that they're, you know, really crucial areas. So hopefully that will be something we can add to, that's in addition to what's already listed in the framework to date.
Thanks, Nicola. And I suppose I just to add to that, clearly that whilst we will do everything that we can to make sure that that data is available, there are sometimes issues with the way in which that data is collected that will either mean that we can't provide it at that very small geography. Sometimes it's because of the numbers actually being too small to enable that to be collected, or the the kind of the burden or cost of doing the collection at that level. So we may not be able to drill everything down as low as that, but as Nicola says, we're trying to make sure that we can make as much of that available as we possibly can. The other couple of points that you raised, Councillor Ross, about the responsiveness of the planning department, I'm sure that we can go back and have a conversation with planning. I think this falls into my category of sort of customer measures, if you like, so the quality and the overall level of service that the people receive, whether that's developers or anyone else. I'm sure we can work some of that through, and we'll talk to the planning department about that. And then the local plan point, I think there was a report to the Cooperative Executive recently about the local development framework, which sets out the timescales for those for the draft plan to be put out for consultation. So I think that's now in the public domain. But I'm not close to that, so I'll refrain from going any further on that one, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ross, is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Gillian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it looks like a comprehensive overview of issues, and I guess, as Councillor Ross said, once we get working in our committees, we'll understand which ones we need. These are just two little points I have, and one of them is on this issue we were talking about, the plan, the Sheffield plan. So that is on page 19. Sorry, I'm doing it online because I found that easier. Let me just scroll down to it again. Item 6, isn't it? We were talking about it. It says at the very end of the sentence, including well-being, resilience and biodiversity. Can we put in carbon reduction there? Is that part of our overall city strategy, or are we not allowed to put that in there? It's just a question. And then the other item I have is also on page 19, and it's point 1, and it says, assess every key decision we make for its impact on climate change, which I fully support, but I'm just curious here, so we can assess it for its impact. What happens if it has a massive impact? Are we going to do anything with that assessment? How are we going to judge whether we go ahead with it or not? So I don't think I need an answer immediately, but these are just things I'm thinking about.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. The wording on item 6, I think, and Nicola will correct me if I'm wrong, is a direct lift from what's in the one-year plan. So what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we've got a clear line of sight between what's in the one-year plan and what's in this framework. I know that as part of the local plan process, the impact of climate change, carbon reduction is absolutely part of that. Whether we can change that wording at this stage because it is directly from the one-year plan, I think is a question. But I'm confident that that is being looked at as part of the local plan process. And on the climate change impact assessment, which is a piece of work that I am sort of involved in. Yes, as you say, there's only any point in doing any impact assessment, whether it's a climate change impact assessment, a quality impact assessment, or anything else, if that information is then used to consider what the proposal is, and to think about what can be done to mitigate that in the case of a negative impact being identified. So that's very much part of the thinking, and I think that's as I say, there's only any point doing an impact assessment if that's going to come through.
I just wondered how you will prioritise, whether you would prioritise economic development or climate change. You know, this is. Are there going to be some ways of determining how you will make this assessment, which gets priority? Really, I think is part of my question.
I mean, I think this is a developing piece of work at the moment, so if you're okay, we'll take that away and I can come back to you separately on that.
Thank you. Councillor Masters?
Thank you, Chair. It's a point, really. I mean, I'm a member of the Transition Committee for Climate Change, Economy and Development, and I notice on this document, which has got page 20, it's point 8, skills and employment. Now, on the original document, it is highlighted that support young people with 500 new apprenticeships targeting support. And the thing is, what's going to be recorded is the number of apprenticeships delivered. Now, we know full well that the quality can vary. So can you just sort of enlighten me as to how you sort of decide on the quality of the jobs as well, of the apprenticeships, as well as just the number? It's be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the reason that it's highlighted in yellow is reflecting the fact that that's still in development and that we've identified that that's not an entirely adequate measure here to capture all the information that would be needed in order to give that level of sort of quality rather than just quantity. So I think what we're doing here is we're exploring with the appropriate officers what the additional information would be that we would capture, as well as the quantity of apprenticeships. So is it about the different levels of apprenticeship that have been that young people have been supported into, or is it something else? And both what would be appropriate and then what data would be available that would support that in an ongoing way. So that's why it's in yellow.
No, that's great. And basically, I hope sort of that would include whether it leads on to proper full-time job.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just trying to remember, James, how many conversations we've had over the years on the performance management framework, so it's nice to see it coming round again. And thank you for the work that's going into this. I've got a number of comments, really, and I'm just going to try and sort of chunk them up a bit. One is, I mean, this is a mixture, isn't it, what you've got at the moment, and we do need to think it through a bit more, obviously, and obviously that's an opportunity for the committee to comment on. But first of all, we've got a set of organisational performance measures, haven't we? A lot of this is process, and we just need to actually work out what the key milestones are. And I'm not sure whether or not that would easily fit into this ongoing monitoring process. We might need to take that out of it. So that's the first set, which is for organisational. But we've also got a set of organisational internal performance indicators. So, for example, some of this stuff is about the proportion of apprentices from BA, MEM backgrounds and stuff like that as well. I just think they probably need to be sort of separated out a bit, but I really support the fact they need to be allocated to the committees in the future so that the committees can actually satisfy themselves that we're doing what we said we would do. Then I come on to services. So some of the indicators that we'll need, people will need to know how well the services are doing in terms of delivering what they're supposed to be doing. So that's activity and stuff like that as well. But there's a different set of indicators, aren't there, about is it making any difference? The impact stuff as well, and I think we need to think about that as well. And I mean, that's obviously the most difficult thing to assess, but it's also the most important. So you've got that relationship between, yes, the services are actually going out and doing visits, but is it making any difference? So that's the sort of question I think committees will want to ask in the future. So that's my second sort of chunk of them. So they, and the third point really is, how is the question really, how do we tie finance into this as well? So that a service might be doing fantastically well, but we might be spending an awful lot of money on it, or vice versa. A service might be doing very well and we're not spending much money on that. We might want to work out what the secret is there in terms of how efficiently and effectively it's working. So I know that's not easy as well, but we need to work that through, and I definitely think thinking about how that's going to fit into the committee structure is the way to go. So just some comments, and I've tried to keep it sort of simple rather than talking about individual indicators, because I suppose the other comment I would make for colleagues, and I'm somebody who's been involved in doing stuff like this myself in the past, is that this isn't going to be the be-all and end-all. It's just really something that's going to enable us to ask questions. And some of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of what, you know, the overall, the really important stuff, I think will have to be dealt with in different ways. So I think we have to be realistic about our expectations. And this is a key, I think, to start to answer some of those qualitative questions that colleagues were quite rightly asking. Not just, you know, are they jobs, but are they good jobs, or what the impact is actually as well. So thank you for bringing this. Thank you for having the conversation again. And hopefully I've tried to make some constructive suggestions for moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. So yes, I think I agree with all of those points. I think the first point you made about there being quite a lot of things in this framework that sort of milestones, or we will deliver X strategy, or we will do Y plan or Z review, is absolutely right, clearly. And actually the doing of that thing doesn't improve performance in itself. So we've begun to think about, there's a part A and a part B to this. So there's a part A of doing the action, and then there's a part B of actually understanding how that action is translating into impact on the ground. And I think the point that you made about activity and impact is critical here. And I suppose that's what I was trying to get at a little bit with that distinction between looking at service performance, which I think is your activity point, and then actually what does that mean in terms of the overall quality of the service that's being delivered, and how do citizens perceive that? And I suppose I was thinking about an example of in adult social care, for example. So there might be some activity measures around the number of reviews that are being completed, or the length of time it takes between assessment and a package of care being put in place, which are really important from the point of view of managing the overall sort of service performance of that area of work. But we also need to understand, as part of that, what are the views of the people who are receiving that care, their families, and what's their overall satisfaction with that. And I think that's going to be something that within the new committee structure, that the committees are going to want to take a view on both parts of that jigsaw, if you like. And similarly, as you said, Councillor MacDonald, tying the financial performance into this is key, and that actually helps to triangulate the overall performance of both the organisation, but individual services within it, so that if we've got really good activity levels, that's translating into good sort of customer quality, but the finances are overspending, or vice versa. Seeing all of that in the round is going to be helpful for the committee to be able to sort of ask the right questions. I think it's not resolved at the moment, being completely honest about exactly how we bring the finance information together with the other stuff. But that's something that we're absolutely working on, and making sure that we've got those measures included. So that's an area of development, but it's something that we're very conscious about. And then I think the only other point was how we separate out some of the internal measures versus some of the, I suppose, more outward or service delivery focused measures. I think that's something that we could and should do, because it is a bit sort of scattered through the framework as it sits at the moment. And we'll take that one away and have a look and think about presentationally how we do that.
Can I just make one more point? Sorry, Chair. I was just thinking while you were talking that I suppose fundamentally we've got to focus on who will this information be used by as well. I think that's the other thing that, because we're sort of starting to talk about a very different setup in terms of committees. So I suppose that's something that there'll need to be a continuing dialogue about, actually. So we've got, on the one hand, we've got the LACs who are wanting more information. But I did notice, for example, that voids was missing from the list of key indicators on housing that I'd certainly like to keep an eye on in my area. But also, so LACs want information at a very localised level, potentially, and committees need to have a view about a particular service area, probably, or services, or however we choose to organise those, and they'll want to go into that in depth as well. So it's quite interesting. It is actually a real challenge for setting up something like this. So good luck. Thank you.
Councillor Dawn?
Thank you, Chair. Things have become more clear today. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that we're considering the quality of the service on our citizens, because at the end of the day, all of this is about people. It might come under place, but actually it all has an impact on people of Sheffield. One of my questions I do have, I think it's a process thing for the new system. I understand that we've got this framework right now with these pieces of work on, but how would a committee get a piece of work into the framework if they started to see an issue arising that needed monitoring for performance? How fluid would that be, or was there going to be a certain point where we'd have to wait? I'm just thinking this would be an opportunity for committees to get things early, to start to work on things.
James?
Sorry. Thank you. So just before I answer Councillor Dale's point, just on Councillor MacDonald's follow-up point, I think the question about who the information is going to be used by is really important. And one of the things that we're doing, so, as I mentioned, behind the scenes, is having putting some effort into thinking about our technology and making sure that we've got a single version of the truth, which is not something that we've always had in the past, being completely honest about it, so that we can cut that data in different ways, and this sort of comes on to Councillor Dale's point as well, depending who's looking at it and what they're most interested in. So we want the information that's being presented to a committee to be the same information that's being used by a service manager. And that's really, really important. It might be at a different level, and there might be, the service manager will probably want to have a broader suite or a deeper suite of indicators that are specific to their area. But fundamentally, that should all add up to the same answer, if you like. We'll make sure we pick up the specific point on housing voids as well, so I haven't lost that one. Sorry, Councillor Dale, your question about how the committees will be able to influence the performance framework. I mean, I think again this is still something that we're sort of wrestling with slightly as we move through into the committee system. But I think conceptually, probably where we would look to be going with it is that probably at the beginning of the year we'd want to be presenting each committee with a report about the performance in their areas, giving them the opportunity to use that to help set their work programme. And as Councillor MacDonald was saying, this is only ever going to be one part of the jigsaw in terms of what's the information that you use to help you understand how we're doing, but hopefully a useful part. And then I think what we can do is through that process identify where there are specific issues that we need to look into in more detail. And what I should have said at the beginning is that there is more information that sits behind all of this. So there's a whole suite of housing indicators, for example. We're only presenting our first take on what we think the key ones are here. But then if that particular committee said, actually, we want to look specifically at, homelessness and temporary accommodation, there's a whole suite of information that sits below that, and we can present that and provide that to the committee. So I think we've got that flexibility. Nicola, is there anything you want to add to that at all?
I think it's worth just mentioning the specific topic reports that are referenced in the paper at this stage, because they sort of speak to that same point about the sort of depth of information that sits behind these sort of headline indicators, and just to sort of really to sort of reiterate the question about whether they are at this stage, if there's anything that we need to also add to those list of topic areas to make sure that we are covering sort of known areas right from the outset, so we can build that into the process that we're developing.
Councillor Rivers?
Thank you, Chair. I think my
mine is more of a comment in terms of, it's on page 17, and it's with regarding to LACs being provided with support of fly tipping. I just think that we need to take into consideration early on that some LACs would have more fly tipping than others. Areas where the privation is might also be an effect, would be affected. I belong to the Central LAC. We had a meeting, and I know that there's a specific amount, obviously, to support this, and this will be an ongoing support. I get that, but you can imagine that some LACs would have more needs than the others, and being so close to the city centre, we get a lot more problems. So it'll be good to keep that in mind, obviously. I also would like to say thank you for putting this together. It's kind of in the beginning of transitional and moving into changes. We obviously want to an area that will always be developing, and these comments will be taken on board, I hope. My other question is, Chair, which is also a comment, is on page 20, and it's item 2. It's really great that Race Equality Commission findings will be incorporated into making sure that there's equality and equity in the city. But we also need to keep in mind that we have communities that are coming to Sheffield, and we'll have new communities constantly, as we always have done as a city of sanctuary. So it's not only just race, but more of a holistic approach of looking at equality and equity in the city and developing and delivering these services. These are just 2 comments, just to make sure that we do that. And I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing thing anyway, to make sure that everybody's protected and supported, and equality of these services are being done. So yeah, that's just my contribution to you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rivers. I'm sure we'll pick up the fly tipping point. We can do that perhaps outside of the meeting. The point you made in terms of equity and equality, yes, absolutely. Clearly it's going to be. We've made the commitment to respond to the Race Equality Commission recommendations, which of course we will do. But one of the other things that we are trying to do through the development of this is to ensure that, as far as through the development of this framework, is to ensure that as far as possible the measures that we have, we can look at by different protected characteristic as well, because we know that there are differential outcomes for different groups of people in the city, and I think it's important as part of our performance management as an organisation that we understand that to begin with, and then we can use that to help take action where we spot that as an issue. So just to provide a little bit of reassurance on that point as well. It's something that I think we have good information on in some areas and less good in others, so that would be a developmental piece too, I think. Nicola, do you want to say anything on that note?
Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Just to come back and pick up a couple of points. One, I think Councillor McDonald made a very good point, basically on a cost-benefit analysis, actually, of some of the actions and a way of tying that in, so I'd support that point. Just a little bit of concern about IT systems and collecting the data, and whether our IT systems, 1, are up to collecting the data, 2, whether all departments and various things that can intermesh and talk to one another. In other words, they're running the same systems and so on. And I know experience with the fire authority using the Power BI system, it's actually live, and you can see, you log in, and 3 hours later the data will have changed. I'm not sure our systems are going to be as sophisticated as that, but just how robust are our IT systems supporting all this data collection?
I will bring Nicola in because I will quickly get out of my depth on this one. But What we're doing on this is actually similar to what the fire service are doing. So we're looking at introducing a Power BI solution. In fact, we've got some pilots of that up and running within the resources portfolio already, so that we can do exactly what you said, which is to provide those automatic updates into the system. That will be challenging in some areas. So some of our line of business systems where that information needs to be drawn from are pretty old. And it's not going to be easy to automate some of that. So I'm thinking about, I think, probably pretty well-known issues in terms of the housing system homes will be quite difficult to create some of those automated connections. But there is a piece of work that's ongoing that is linked to the overall performance project around automation. And we've identified that one of the sort of things that we need to do quite quickly is to think about how we automate some of those data uploads, because there's an awful lot of wasted time and effort of officers taking data manually from one system and placing it into the reporting system. That introduces error as well. It's just a fact of life, and it means that data is less timely than it would be if there was an automated connection into it. So that's a piece of work that we're on with. It isn't going to be straightforward, I have no doubt about that. But that is where we need to get to, because it will improve the accuracy and timeliness of the data, and that's critical if this is to be useful. Nicola, do you want to add anything to that? Because I think I'm at the end of my knowledge on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just bearing in mind where we want to get to with this is really important, and acknowledging that different systems, different services are at a different place. So we're putting in place sort of a preferred kind of journey for each system and service where we'd like to get to, which is of course sort of that more automated approach to pulling data through. And there's various stages on that route, from sort of to get technical, sort of extracting sort of chunks of the data out and sort of and putting those in a place where they can be drawn through automatically, right through to sort of typing in the manual numbers. And obviously we want to move people through that journey at the right time and as fast as we can, to make sure that we're sort of getting to that more automated way, but acknowledging that, you know, that's not going to be possible for everyone from day one with this. The other thing that we are doing is where we're having new systems that are coming in, we're engaging with services on those as early as possible, so that we can make sure that the requirements of the performance system are thought about, how we might interact with those systems. So I suppose two things really: where we can sort of automate and use that technology to our advantage to give everyone the most up-to-date data. We're doing that, but we're sort of being a little bit pragmatic to say we know that that's not going to be the case for everyone, but we'll put a time scale in place to move people along towards that.
Thank you. I mean, the experience of professional life and councils and other things, IT upgrades always make me nervous, you know, and things, and experience like the health service where they managed to design systems that didn't talk to one another in different branches of the system. So I think it's essential that we ensure that where departments are working on their own upgrades, there's an overarching system where we make sure that people don't go for their preferred system that don't intermesh with other bits of the council system and cause problems further down. And I accept that there are going to be teething problems with this, and we need to get to a stage, you know, of utopia in the end, and it's going to be difficult along the way, but making sure that there's an overall plan so that all the different systems can talk to one another, I think is going to be pretty essential in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you for letting me come back in, Chair. While I've been listening to everybody, obviously my little brain's been churning away in a sort of dangerous manner. But I was just really thinking that what's really missing in here, a massive void, is health and well-being. That we had this conversation over the one-year plan, and we are a very progressive public health organisation and so on. But I remember saying to Greg, we haven't got anything in the one-year plan which is really about public health, health and wellbeing, prevention, all of that stuff. And he says, yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I actually feel that probably because we're doing that, we've not really been focusing on some of these other big indicators that we feel really passionate about. So I would like to suggest that that's an area that we do include in the framework. I mean, it's not a collection of new data, it's a collection of it's an issue about picking up data from elsewhere and so on as well, that is available. And I suppose the other point linked to that is one of the strategic priorities, I think, for the Council is going to be prevention. We've got bits of that in here around children's services. It's a theme, but I definitely think we should think about that because that's something that's really important. It's not just about firefighting, it's also about ensuring that we understand what we do helps people in a way that means that their situation doesn't get worse. So that's another thing that I think we might want to give some attention to because it's definitely really important strategically. So those are my two comments that I've thought about while people have been talking and I've been listening to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Health and wellbeing is obviously something that perhaps hasn't come out as strongly as it needs to in the one-year plan, and therefore it hasn't translated into this. There is, I think, a review and refresh of the health and wellbeing strategy going on, so it might be worth waiting to see what comes out of that, and then making sure that what we're measuring here sort of reflects some of that. But there's probably some easy steps that we can take to improve that information, because as you say, we've got a lot of it. It's a data-rich area, and we've also got the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment as well, of course, which picks up some of this. But we perhaps need a bit of a stronger link between the JSNA and this piece of work. So yes, we'll certainly take that one away and have a look at it. And prevention as well. Yes, as you say, we've got some measures in here, but they're sort of a bit scattered around, and they're probably not as it probably doesn't give a holistic picture of prevention as we would need. So again, we'll take that one away and have a think about how we can structure that a bit better.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in.
Thank you, James and Nicola, for your presentation today and answering the questions from members. I'm sure you'll be coming back next year to give us an update on progress. Thank you very much. We're just going to have a 5-minute break. Sorry.
Sorry, Chair, but I've got my hand up to ask another further question. Would that be okay, or is it time out?
That's fine. Sorry, I just totally didn't see you there. So
thank you. Right. I mean, it was something that Councillor Dale sort of mentioned that triggered a thought in my mind. I mean, you're asking about sort of suggested measures, and there's a load for the committee that I'm a member of, but I'm not aware, that might be my ignorance, I've missed things, I'm not aware of any of this actually coming to the committee or that it was being done in the background. So are there proposals to make us aware of these? Because of course, I have read them, but I've now got a context for where they've come from. So what are the proposals to sort of inform others about whether they might want to add something to the measures?
So I think this is the first time that we've had this conversation about this framework. I think if other committees wanted us to come and talk about the specific issues for their areas, then we'd be happy to do that. And I'll be guided by the committee in terms of whether we should. I know I can talk to Alice and the team about whether it would be helpful just to programme those in, if that was something that the chairs of those committees thought would be helpful.
No, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dawn?
Thank you, Chair. Could I make that as a recommendation from this meeting then, that some of these go to the relevant committees if they've got time on their work programme? Yeah, just mindful that officers and the committees themselves have already got full work programmes, but yeah, thank you.
Does committee agree with that? Is Dawn's recommendation? Is that okay? Yeah? Any final comments? No? Right, thank you, James and Nicola, for today. We are going to have a 5-minute break, if that's okay, and we'll resume at 11:05. James's presentation on performance framework. What we'll be recommending, well, advising, is that the executive, that the performance framework needs to find a way to measure impact, quality, efficiency, including finance impact. The new committee structure needs to include, in terms of reference, what measures and data each committee will receive, almost like a scrutiny role. Both decision committees and local area committees. Themes go to relevant committees. Is that okay? We kind of try to get some points from the questions and comments people were making today. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that, I mean, you could actually say, and other comments were made, you know, like I made the stuff about health and well-being and stuff as well. You could just pick that up as well, I would suggest. I think they will be taken on by the officers. I'm just saying that members also made a number of comments about the content of the framework as well. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's fine. And also each committee then can decide on the themes and what's missing for their committee. So I'll be okay with these 3 kind of recommendations. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, so we'll move on to item 8 now. And I'm going to ask Alice to discuss the policy, the work plan.
Thanks, Chair. That's one of the shortest reports I've ever written, actually, quite. So, the main thing is, if you look at the very last page of your papers, page 24, where I've set out the draft work plan. Now, this committee has actually, you've heard, you've touched on, you've looked at each three of those now. So there isn't anything particularly for future meetings set out. But what you have got in that last column are actions for carrying on potentially outside of the committee meetings, and especially against customer experience around the work groups. Now, I'm working a little bit with Mark Bennett to try and make sure that what you do in those work groups actually makes sense. I'm also aware, Kate, that there needs to be a conversation involving you about what makes it work well as well, because there's no point in the committee undertaking work that isn't of benefit, really, in terms of this. And then you've made some recommendations in terms of performance management, and I don't think, from my perspective, that means much more for this committee to do. And please tell me if I'm wrong, because it is very much your work plan. So there are a couple of issues that have come to light that aren't on here in the last literally sort of 24 hours. One is around finding space in the agenda for not for the one-year plan, but for the iteration of the next 3 years corporate plan. So that's been suggested as a possible item for your next meeting, because work is ongoing on that. And it just so happens that I work within the team that have got a strong role in that. So we're trying to make sure that there is something that can be shared with the transitional committee. So there's a suggestion that could be on the agenda for the meeting in January, which really isn't that far away. Beyond that, I feel it's with you as the committee as to what else you might want to look at, or whether it's actually a case of using the time to get really stuck into the customer experience to come back in the March meeting with some findings, advice, recommendations. That's my...
Councillor Dawn?
Thank you, Chair. I think this will all depend on the membership and the level of commitment that we have for the additional work other than attending these meetings. So just be mindful that we have got the three areas of work. I'm mindful that we've not done anything about that yet since our last meeting. And we are looking at setting some dates for January to get those working groups up and running. I'd like to ask through the chair, if possible, the members that are here, if they, I know we have had a few people respond, but which areas they would like to be involved in, or would they just want to be sent an email and invited to a meeting? Because we need to get the work going. We need to get things happening really. And also, I'm happy to look at the iteration of the 3-year corporate plan, but I would really like to visit our future approach to priority budgeting. Because I don't think we've really touched on that deeply at the moment.
If I might, Chair, this feels a bit sort of strange, but as you're in the room, Kate, the timetabling for the future approach to priority budgeting, does it allow for some work fairly soon, ongoing?
Sorry, I keep on switching it on because I thought you'd finished. To be honest, it is an iterative process, and the early approach this year was to start to just go and talk to committees so that committees got even used to the idea of starting to consider what their priorities are and so on. And in fact, that should inform the work throughout next year as well. So I think we will probably need to have a further conversation about how the committees are going to do it. I don't think it's directly time urgent at the moment, I think, is probably the clearest answer to your question then, Alice. But when the committee's welcome to discuss it at any point in terms of what their ideas might be, but that would be probably shaping the next year rather than this year's process. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Sorry, Chair, that was a bit slightly unusual, but that's very helpful in terms of helping to advise you. And it might be that the agenda for 13th of January could include something around the future approach to priority budgeting again, as well as the 3-year corporate plan, because in a way there's a strong relationship between those two.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. I was going to ask for an update on the work groups. Apologies. I mean, you can imagine that given my other responsibilities, my day job at the moment, that I haven't had much time in terms of my diary. But what I was going to suggest is that what we need for customer services and improving customer services, one of the things that we need, I think, are set of standards. And I think that's something that I think we talked about when Mark came to the committee. So I wondered whether or not I was going to volunteer anyway to join a work group that was considering customer services, and it would also give an opportunity to get feedback from the review the peer review that we're having at the moment. So I think that would be a really useful piece of work, but it doesn't need to be the whole committee. It's up to you, Chair, whether you would like it to be a piece of work for the whole committee or whether it would actually be one of the work groups that's doing that. So I was just going to volunteer to support whichever, if there is a work group that is doing it. So I wanted an update on the work groups. I think Councillor Dale's given a brief update on that, but I'm volunteering to support that if the group's going to meet. Thank you.
I think that's going to be one of the working groups. So we'll send some dates for next year across for that. Councillor Dale?
I think Councillor MacDonald just said what I was going to say.
So we are planning on setting up 3 working groups, and we are going to send out an email this week, hopefully, with the 3 working groups, and then if members would just decide or choose whichever working group you'd like to be part of, and you can be part of more than one if you like. Councillor Ross?
Yes, Chair. It strikes me that we've only got 4 months till the new committees, January to the end of April, and April, as we know, is filled with other things as well. So time is limited. What I think we need to decide is what is going to be most useful in the limited time, what is going to be helpful in establishing the new committees, and what actually needs to be done anyway, irrespective of what system we've got there. Strikes me that this particular committee, in talking to other members on other committees that are inundated, that we actually haven't done a great deal. I mean, this is only the second formal meeting and the work groups haven't been established yet. But looking at the work groups, obviously housing repairs and things is something that needs looking at irrespective of the system, and I think we can usefully do something on that, thinking what is the journey getting a repair done, to understand if there are blockages in the system that can be improved. Gates talked about the customer service experience and peer review. Yeah, that's clearly something that is useful to be done as well. So yeah, I suppose my point is general is how can we be most helpful with the limited time available in the transition?
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Dale?
Sorry, can I just respond to that, Councillor Ross? It's not been for lack of trying. Emails have gone out to members asking for a commitment, and we've not had any response from many who are actually on this committee to say that they want to be in a working group. So we're getting to the point now where we're just going to set some dates and then people either turn up or not.
Apologies if I've missed that, but I was unaware of that. I don't know whether it was because I wasn't at the first meeting and got missed off the list or whatever, but apologies if I missed that, because it's important that we all do respond to emails like that.
I think emails went out straight after the last meeting, the first meeting that we had, to ask people to put their names down against working groups, and we didn't get much of a response, and then we had to wait until we tried again. Councillor MacDonald?
Just to clarify, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that the housing repairs and maintenance item was actually about the access to the service. It wasn't the whole service. I think another committee is actually looking into that in a lot more detail. So I think that's all part of the customer service. It all comes under, it's all about the contact centre, isn't it? And people getting access to the service in the first instance. I think those are subsets of the customer services experience.
If I might, Chair, I was actually going to flag that up as well, okay, that the Communities and Neighbourhoods Transitional Committee are doing much more of an in-depth look into the kind of whole housing repairs and maintenance service. This was very much about that, what is the journey, i.e. the access to that part of the journey and through the contact centre, rather than the housing and repairs service. So this was all very much a focus intended around customer service, contact centre, but picking up on a couple of themes that seem to be potentially of issue to those trying to access the call centre.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Ruiz?
Thank you, Chair. I was on at the first meeting and joined you for this one. And unfortunately, obviously, the last one was cancelled. But I did receive the email, and I think when we first started the whole transitional issues, we were worried about how little time we have. So much work has went into it, but we have to really be committed to do this group work, because without that, then obviously we can't do the work, it seems. It's good to have working group, because working group, it's like focus group. You're focusing on something. And it's how we worked in the Risk Quality Commission. You can join different ones if you want. But the point is, in order to get there, we need to really be committed. I'm just kind of reiterating the fact that group work works better, and I think we need to really commit to this. And I think I emailed you, Alice, because I was pleased that the decision this committee took was to actually have group work, which is not happening in many areas. So this is great. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rivers. Any other questions or comments? No.
Chair, no, I'm comfortable with that. I've noted what people have said there, the willingness to be in certain groups, and I'm going to follow this all up. So I'll make a commitment that come January, you've got something that you can feel you can engage in. Date of next meeting is usually.
Okay, so thank you for that, everyone. The date of the next meeting is the 13th of January at 4 p.m. and it will be in the chamber. We will send out some dates for the working groups as well. Hopefully we'll have some dates in January to start the working groups. Thank you very much for today. And that's the end of the meeting.